Good afternoon, young warriors. Happy Labor Day. The most influential movie that I can think of in my life is 1985. It opened up the very first scene. You hear a guy skipping rope. In the background, what's eventually turned out to become one of my all-time favorite songs, Lunatic Fringe by Red Riders, playing in the background. It shows a young man just jumping rope, and he introduces himself. My name's Loudon Swain. I turned 18 last week. I wasn't ready for it. Haven't done anything yet. So I made a deal with myself. This year, I'll make my mark. His mark was the wrestling version of Rocky. He wanted to go on and he wanted to face and challenge the three-time undefeated state champion, Brian Shute, local wrestler in Washington State. I'm not going to sit here and dissect the movie and say anything other than I'm going to give my perspective. First off, as an 18-year-old young man or a 24-year-old young man when it came out. And then now. And I'm going to challenge you to compare the two. Loudon took this on himself where he wanted to drop 2 weights and meet and challenge Brian Shute. It was a very formidable task, very, very formidable. And he was met by the mandatory dragons. Anytime you take on any kind of an aspiration, you better expect to be met by not only dragons, but dragons that mirror the immensity of your task. And this was a big deal. Started out the first thing right away. Loudon, he announces this to the team. He wanted to drop weight. And the coach calls him over and says, I need a minute. And the coach talks to him and he says, Loudon, he says, you're killing it where you're at. Why do you want to make life so difficult on yourself? When he found out that Loudon wanted to wrestle Shute, the coach's reaction was stunning. He goes, Shute! Nobody wants to wrestle Shute. Coming from one of the most influential guys in his life, his coach, his wrestling coach. That's tough to overcome. The movie progresses on. The next dragon that he faces basically is that of his team. His team thinks that he's doing it for selfish reasons. But I think that he persevered. He showed them with his actions that it was more than that. It wasn't a shallow self-interest endeavor. And then I think the third dragon that he faced, was probably one of the most powerful. And that came from probably the most influential guy in his life outside of his parent, was his teacher, Mr. Tanneran. And they have a quick exchange playing one-on-one, and Mr. Tanneran, when he gets done and Loudon says he's got to go ahead and go to practice, Mr. Tanneran says, hey, Loudon, you think you're overextending it on this Shute challenge? And he sent on his way. See, when I was 24 years old and I'm watching this, I'm sitting there thinking, like, I admired the guts that he forged ahead and he fought through. He even went so far as to go and he sat in on a meet to watch Brian Shute wrestle. And it was complete, it was utter domination, where this guy absolutely dismantled his opponent this side of 10 seconds, and he pinned him. So we have all these dragons that are going. And Loudon sees it through. And I think what he did was by doing that, and it's a little bit of a mix on what I feel now, but I feel like by persevering, he earned the answer. And that came in the form of meeting with a gentleman named Elmo, who Loudon worked with. Loudon worked at a hotel. He catered stuff up. Elmo was the cook. Elmo was a 40-some-year-old guy, grizzly guy, very, very blue collar, very straightforward, my kind of a guy. Elmo goes to the hotel to see him on the night of the shoot match. He wasn't there. So the scene shows he's going through the hallways. He's going through the apartments where Elmo lives. He knocks on the door. Elmo lets him in. Loudon expressed concern. Elmo, he says, I thought something was wrong. He says, I stopped by the hotel. Elmo says, of course I'm going. He says, tonight you wrestle shoot, dummy. So Elmo's getting all dressed up, putting on a white button-down shirt with a tie and a jacket. And Elmo says, you're taking the night off for this. He says, they'll dock you the night's pay. And Elmo says, look, kid, money's not everything. And Loudon says, but Elmo, it's 6 lousy minutes on the mat at best. The perfect response from Elmo. He says, kid, you ever hear of Pele? Elmo says, yeah, he's a soccer player. Elmo says, a very famous soccer player. He said, I'm sitting in the room here by myself and I'm watching the Spanish channel. And I'm watching what this guy can do with a ball in his feet. He said, I don't know anything about soccer. He says, all of a sudden, this guy spins up into an upside-down somersault and he kicks in the goal. So the goalie never knew what hit him. He says, Pele just gets up and rips off his jersey and goes running around to the fans. And the fans are going crazy. And Elmo says, and I'm sitting here in my room and I start to cry. He says, because another human being, a species that I happen to belong to, could lift himself and do something to make this a better place for all of us, even if it was just for a moment. And he looks at Loudon and he says, it's not about the 6 minutes. It's about what happens in those 6 minutes. Even if you haven't seen it, you could probably guess that Loudon went out and he secured the victory in grand fashion. But now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rewind and I'm going to give just a little bit of my perspective on why it influences me to this day. We saw Elmo as a young man, an 18-year-old guy, just turned 18 years old. And he viewed this thing basically as I want to go after the biggest dragon I can find. Brian Shoot. I mean, it couldn't have been a better pick. But see, here's the key. The key is not about, the dragons or the coach. The key is not about anything other than, I invite you to go back to the introduction when he was introducing himself. He's jumping rope. And he says, I haven't done anything. So I made a deal with myself. Young warriors, having walked this earth for the better part of 58 years now, I've learned the power of making a deal with yourself. What he did was he made it where he decided the outcome. Loudon decided the outcome. It's a done deal. I decide the outcome. I made a deal. I will see this thing through. And when the coach literally says, you know what, you don't have a chance in this, Loudon forged on. He was convicted. His purpose was large. when when these guys were busting his chops, he knew. He was convicted. He made a deal with himself. He decided the outcome. And when Mr. Tanneran, the teacher, says, Lyle, do you think you're overextending yourself on this shoot challenge? Of course he is. Young warriors, for you to aspire to any level of world-changing excellence, it's going to require you to overextend. It's going to require you to make life not so comfortable for yourself. Make a deal with yourself. You choose the outcome. Young warriors, I've always tried to not provide answers. I've always tried to not really give advice. You know, I try to share my perspective, but I try to point. And I say, but you got to go that way. You've got to go. You've got to go and do it. I will encourage you. But it's my belief that if I give you an answer, if I give you, something that you even think is an answer, what you do, all of a sudden now you find yourself in a place. You run into a stop sign. You hit a limit. And world changers can't do that. And I think that's why Loudon Swain went on and did what he did. See, when I was 24 years old, I looked at that and I'm like, man, he beat Brian Shute. He beat the 3-time undefeated state champion, undefeated through his whole high school career. He beat him. But now, as a 58-year-old man, I saw a young man who made a deal with himself, who decided on the outcome and did something that nobody has ever done before. Young warriors, I believe in you. I believe in you. Dragons will show up. I will not downplay them. But as I've said in the past, I refuse to give them permission to overtake you. My challenge to you, make a deal with yourself. And you decide the outcome. I believe in you. I'm out.